In 2016, a subterranean home appeared in the streets of Milan. Marvelously strange, yet clearly unlivable, the tiny rooms convey a desire to make the uninhabitable homely. But they also embody a certain temporal foreclosure. They can quickly disappear by being covered up and forgotten. Titled Border Life, the installation alerts us to dwelling needs and homing desires that trouble the recent mainstream turn to temporary urbanism. In particular, the tendency to celebrate precarity for its potential to intervene in urban dynamics. The particular aesthetics of care in this work are a gesture that extends to actual lives residing below the surface. Tunnel dwellers in Bucharest that until recently were living underground in the city's heated tunnels. Most struggled with drug addiction and suffered from tuberculosis or HIV, which suggests their underground home was contingent on the provisional time of the bodies that inhabited it as they lived out the consequences of unattended illness and addiction. But despite the conditions of impossibility that defined their shared reality, tunnel dwellers insisted that they were family. Being together in the hot and cramped spaces of the tunnels, it seems, engendered a distinct view from below among the residents that was not immediately visible to those looking from above, least of all the mainstream media that painted the tunnels as a living hell. However, images captured by a photographer who lived with the tunnel dwellers under the city's Gara de Nord station tell a different story. They depict attempts to transform the tunnels into livable and intimate places by organizing and furnishing the space. Seen in this light, these underground dwellings and the lives that inhabit them become less strange and more familiar. The lack of affordable housing, as well as a desire for autonomy and self-sufficiency, has led to various forms of squatting. The Christiania commune in Copenhagen, for instance, was formed on an abandoned military base in the early 70s and became a permanent squat when it was legalized. The extent of its permanence, however, rests on collectively resisting privatization attempts to normalize the commune. More recently, self-built dwellings have emerged in central Tokyo. Illegally built on public land, most are collapsible and mobile, but are often reassembled on the same spot. They are removed long enough to allow officials to photograph the public sites before they can be re-erected again. While this community disappears for the official accounting of public space, artists Mia Rushton and Eric Moscopetis have been populating public areas with collective nappings that contest growing restrictions on public space use. These sleep-ins interrupt how time unfolds in the city by reclaiming public spaces as sites of urban living outside the pressure of market dynamics. Drifting off to sleep in such collective circumstances means drifting across private and public spaces to inhabit another time and place. Such a dream habitat is just what artist Doho-san performs with hand-sewn fabric recreations of his past homes from around the world. Translucent, lightweight, and portable, these suitcase homes and the liminal spaces they create embody an orientation towards the past where identity is not attached to the fixity of place. Instead, it is constantly dissolving into the present perspectives that new locations bring about. A different iteration of ephemeral housing is Tarioto, a vertical structure in Hanoi aimed to support different aspects of daily life while moving through densely populated areas. Its playful and adaptable form invites people on the streets to assemble around the traveling pop-up house, expanding the space it occupies. Ephemerality and economic marginality are central to the temporary city, but they are also produced by an increasingly flexible economy that leads to temporary living conditions. This parking lot in the Los Angeles International Airport, for instance, has long served as a temporary home for flight crews with lives on the move. How might we rethink temporary urbanism when it is made by precarious workers whose lives are defined by mobility? In Hong Kong, migrant domestic workers have been taking over Central District every Sunday for decades, building makeshift temporary houses from cardboard boxes. The event is unique for its fleeting temporality. Unlike more permanent enclaves of migrants that appropriate urban space, this cardboard city disappears at the end of each Sunday. This transient but enduring practice is contingent on its own disappearance time and again, and invites us to consider the particular temporality of pop-up phenomena alongside the temporal culture of its urban environment. Under what circumstances are such dwellings temporary yet permanent? While this event reinscribes a sense of home for migrant women, it is a homing desire linked to Hong Kong's exclusionary politics of space, a mandatory living requirement for foreign domestic workers in a city where property is notoriously confined. This has prompted domestic workers to engage in placemaking outside the private space of the household. In doing so, they transform the cultural landscape of a place that otherwise belongs to the imaginary of Hong Kong citizens. We might ask what permanent means in a city characterized by frantic rebuilding and rapid growth. Hong Kong is a city with few long-term plans, where the old is promptly replaced by the new. As Akbar Abbas observes, what appears permanent is very often temporary. In this uncertain landscape, the weekly side of migrant women not only reflects their own ambiguous position as transient figures, but also closely aligns itself with the short-term culture of the city. During the short-lived sit-ins, however, time is slowed down considerably as the women engage in activities of leisure and rest, a clear display of non-productive time that in Hong Kong contradicts the rationale for tolerating the presence of a migrant workforce. And yet, some see this use of Central as positive, infusing the site with new life. Thinking of such sit-ins as an integral part of Hong Kong suggests that foreign maids have a role outside the domestic realm, to produce Central as a public space, open and accessible for various forms of encounter. Here, they are valued not for the labor they perform, but rather for the cultural capital they bring to Central. Their weekly occupation, however, was temporarily displaced by another temporary event, Occupy Central, a collective act of civil disobedience which largely ignored migrant women as guest workers with few rights. Though the women have made a home away from home in Central, it is clear that they have yet to find a place in the national sphere, that is, a place where they matter as political subjects. I leave you with one last thought to consider in contemplating this line of division between precarity and stability that is embodied in the desire for a home. In this case, not the temporary homes that disappear, but the permanent ones that never came to be, like the zombie subdivision left behind by the housing crisis in the US, homes that ended before having a chance to begin at all.